Video games are a powerful medium to convey concepts and elicit emotions. The impact of a video game is heightened by the combination of the narrative and the gameplay. The player experiences a greater emotion and attachment as control of the character is in our own hands and our actions have direct repercussions. Everything from the in-game dialogue to the landscape which we traverse serves to add to the story that is being told and the ideas that are being conveyed. It's the application and execution of these seemingly basic concepts of storytelling that separates a good game from a great one. One such game that has excelled at doing just that is Team Ico's Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus on the surface seems like a straightforward game. A story about a young man driven by companionship and love looks to resurrect a maiden who is sacrificed due to her cursed destiny. Our hero ventures into a forbidden land atop his noble steed in search of a spirit that is said to be able to bring back the souls of the dead. After encountering the spirit Dorman, our request is heeded, but in return we are first tasked with slaying 16 colossi, with a warning which our protagonist pays little attention to. The seemingly simple task of slaying 16 colossi and nothing else lays the groundwork that Team Ico used to build a compelling narrative. Everything in the game centers around the task at hand, with the overarching motivation of bringing the young maiden back to life. But the major questions we have as the player go unaddressed. No narrator tells us why the lands are forbidden, nor any backstory given to the spirit with whom we are making our deal. Yet it's this minimalistic style with which the story is told that truly sets Shadow of the Colossus apart. The mysteries of this forbidden land are ours to decipher as we set out to complete the task. By using the environment and aspects of the gameplay, Team Ico hand us the tools to dig deeper into the lore of the world and to fill in these gaps with our own answers. Actions and rewards. A pairing that goes back to the earliest instances of human civilization. A combination that has been an integral part of human psychology, philosophy, and religion. Rewards act as a motivational factor to perform actions, as well as serving as a loose justification to the morality of such actions. Incentive theory, a branch of behavioral psychology, makes the claim that human behavior is motivated by incentives or rewards. Humans behave in a way that would result in a reward and refrain from behaviors that result in punishment. Behavior has been shown to be modifiable by rewarding or punishing actions, with early experiments in operant conditioning showing that behaviors can be made to be pursued by rewarding such behavior. As opposed to extrinsic rewards, intrinsic incentive theory makes the claim that internal rewards can also be motivating factors to pursue behaviors. A primitive example from species evolution would be feeling pleasure from performing sexual acts, which is used to encourage the spread of genetic material and the continuation of the species. This behavioral theory echoes an ethical theory which had formed 2 centuries prior, act utilitarianism, a branch of consequentialism. The logical basis of this moral philosophy is that humans pursue pleasure and avoid pain, thus acts are good if they bring pleasure. These principles of human behavior have shaped how game designers have laid out the framework for their games. A reward at the end of a mission acts as feedback to the player. Firstly, rewarding a task reinforces the action. Killing a boss and then getting rewarded by XP points, money, weapons, makes the action correct in the framework of the game. If a player wants to get rewarded again, then he or she must kill another boss. This happens until the player progresses to the final boss and completes the game. Secondly, getting rewarded justifies the action. If we take our simplified explanation of act utilitarianism, an action that brings pleasure would be morally correct, and thus getting satisfaction from killing the boss is the game telling us that what we are doing is right, again, in the framework of the game, and to progress the story. However, Team Ico in Shadow of the Colossus rejects this basic aspect of human psychology, and it's this very rejection of motivational theory and game design that allows them to force the player to question the morality of their actions. After slaying the great Colossi, instead of getting rewarded for our actions with experience points or in-game currency, instead of unlocking new weapons or upgrades, instead of being congratulated for our achievement, we are greeted with a melancholic score, making us feel sorry for the beast we have just slayed. It proceeds with us being consumed by an inescapable, unavoidable black miasma, which gradually starts to corrupt our body. Hardly a reward. And yet, in the face of this lack of psychological fulfillment, our overarching motivation to save Mono fuels us to continue, even if we feel that continuing may not be the correct choice. While not immediately rewarding the player has psychological implications, there are moral ones as well. This choice by Team Ico emphasizes the summation of consequentialism itself. The ends justify the means. We travel through fields and forests in search of the next Colossus in an attempt to slay it. Ironically, we kill with the noble motivation to bring Mono back to life. The Colossi hidden in the corners of the map attack only in self-defense when threatened and instigated by us, and then we get no reward. This moral predicament highlights the dichotomy of our goal and the means with which we achieve it. A great example of micro versus macro consequentialism. We are made to ask ourselves, does bringing Mono back to life outweigh the slaying of each Colossus? Shadow of the Colossus's minimalistic approach to world filling gives the player plenty of time to ponder over this question, as well as the other contextual mysteries of the game. Team Ico's design choice of having no side quest to distract us from our true goal also stops us from being distracted from this moral confliction. The long rides between each Colossus is time given to us for reflection and deduction. We get to quietly contemplate our actions and justify to ourselves why we need to continue, as well as piece together the many mysteries of the world around us. The detective work that we conduct is aided by the environmental cues that are placed around the Forbidden Lands. And while I have and will continue to make the point that the navigation system in the game is horrible, it serves as an integral part of world exploration. Instead of the standard at the time of having a minimap show us where to go, to reflect light towards our destination seems to get us lost intentionally, and that's a perfect way to let us explore. If the game featured a checkpoint-based minimap, many regions would go unexplored, untouched, and unseen. This exploration helps us start piecing together our own interpretation of history and the series of events that led to our current situation. The buildings are crumbling and have become one with the earth, indicating the Forbidden Land has been uninhabited for centuries, if not millennia. Remnants of cities in the desert, buildings submerged in lakes, abandoned castles with intricate mechanisms all hint towards a civilization that once thrived, now completely gone. As the story progresses, we get given clues that hint towards the true nature of Dorman's request. These clues, while subtle, reinstate our moral dilemma and the juxtaposition of our actions. One such subtlety is found when we successfully defeat a Colossus. We previously mentioned that we gain no reward for doing such an action, and that in itself should raise questions. But once we are consumed by the black miasma, we get transported back to the starting temple, and it is in these next few moments where we are shown the hint. As a representation of our achievement, as well as an environmental progress indicator, the idols which symbolize each Colossus gets destroyed after we defeat them. And while no deeper thought is given to this destruction, we fail to understand the true symbolism of this act, as well as the mythical connection between Shadow of the Colossus and medieval mythologies. Taking a closer look at this subtle clue, firstly we begin to understand the mythological inspiration behind Shadow of the Colossus, and secondly how this storytelling technique puts moral pressure on our actions. Statues and idols are usually erected to honor gods and immortalize men. This is consistent with most, if not all, cultures around the world. Erecting statues is seen as a way to honor a person, with the statue acting as a symbol of their virtues and personification of their ideals. Taking a closer look at the designs of the idols in Shadow of the Colossus, I noticed similarities between the ones in the game and the statues made by the Aztecs. In particular, the idols in the game strike an uncanny resemblance to the Coatlicue statue unearthed in Tenochtitlan, modern-day Mexico City. In Aztec mythology, Coatlicue was the earth goddess and mother to the moon and stars, and she was the mother of Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. She was both the creator and the destroyer, a mother to both the gods and the mortals. This dualism which she represents is seen throughout the world in Shadow of the Colossus. The Colossi themselves are an amalgamation of earth and buildings, nature and humanity. Our actions embody this dualism. We destroy to create. More specifically, we kill the Colossi to bring Mono back to life. Eventually all things return to her, the earth. And in the final credits of Shadow of the Colossus, we get shown the results of our quest. The slain Colossi as they start to become Earth once the magic that animated them is gone. Her son, Huitzilopochtli, wielding his sword, Xiacotl, a beam of sunlight which reminds me of Wanderer's ancient sword, which is also related to sunlight, was in a constant battle with the darkness. His own birth story is a powerful example of this. The children of Coatlicue, the moon and stars, plotted to kill their mother when she was pregnant with Huitzilopochtli. One narration states that Huitzilopochtli leapt out of the womb fully grown, with sword in hand, and slayed his brothers and sister. In another narration, he jumped out of his mother's severed neck, proceeding to do the same as before. Both stories symbolize the sun's victory over the moon and the stars, and thus the darkness of the night. This conflict is seen in the overarching story of Shadow of the Colossus, the conflict of light and darkness. The one with the ability to control beings created from light, mentioned by the shaman in the open narration, demonstrates that light and dark are two halves of the inhabitants of the Shadow of the Colossus world. And this is a consistent concept in the other Team Ico games. The statue of Coatlicue was accompanied by statues of other deities of the Aztec pantheon in the sacred precinct which was located at the center of Tenochtitlan. Much like how the idols of the Colossi are placed one after the other in the shrine of worship, which is situated in the center of the Shadow of the Colossus map. The sacred precinct was termed the Axis Mundi, or the center of the world. In the Shadow of the Colossus, the shrine represents this Axis Mundi, a central hub from which all parts of the map can be accessed. Once we slay a Colossus, we are brought back to the center of the world, the starting and ending point of our journey. Having taken a deeper look at the potential mythological underpinnings of the idols in Shadow of the Colossus, our next clue is in the act of destroying them. We mentioned earlier that statues and idols are erected to honor and immortalize people, virtues, and ideals, and thus the destruction of said idols would symbolize the rejection of what they stand for. But what do they stand for? We never get told why they're there, just that we need to destroy them. And so, we set about destroying their idols without truly understanding the reasons for doing so. Once we realize this, we realize that our protagonists, blinded by desperation, failed to ask the important question: why? Why are we tasked with destroying the idols? Why must we hunt the colossi and kill them? Why is that the only way to bring Mono back to life? When we finally get the answer to the why, it's already too late. The veil of desperation is lifted, and our moral confliction is brought to bear. Our actions, while noble in intention, have brought about the resurrection of the spirit of darkness, Dorman. And we are the host. Seeing the total corruption of Wanderer's being is met with the realization that we were in the wrong. It's this build-up to the conclusion that sets Shadow of the Colossus apart from other games and what makes the game so impactful. Shadow of the Colossus has been a stellar example of storytelling. We are told close to nothing about the world in which we find ourselves, left alone to our thoughts, completing a mission given to us by a mysterious voice. It's a recipe which brings about self-reflection, questioning our actions and their consequences. The tools of reflection and deduction are given to each player, and it's up to us to use them as we see fit. The answers we come to are of our own reasoning, and that is the beauty of Shadow of the Colossus. Stay safe, and remember to get good.